I'd like to call to order the regular school board meeting for Washington Township Schools. We will begin this meeting as we do all meetings with the pledge. And if I may do so, I will ask Mr. Rent to lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stating for the record that 4 board members are present and 1 is connected via Zoom. So before we get started, I would like to have a moment of silence for Mrs. Christy Woodward. Mrs. Woodward left us unexpectedly last evening, and she was the cafe manager at Spring Mill. Okay, thank you. So we will begin now with July recognitions. Dr. Taylor.
Good evening, President George Davis, Dr. Woodson, members of the board, and good evening to our Washington Township community. Great turnout tonight. Got a few recognitions here this evening. We'd like to start off by recognizing Mr. Brian Funk. So Mr. Funk, if you could join Dr. Woodson. Congratulations to Mr. Funk. He's our director at the J. Everett Light Career Center. During the 2024 Indiana Association of Career Technical Directors Conference this past June, Mr. Funk was nominated for and won the Outstanding Administrator Award. This award is for principals, assistant directors, or other faculty administrative education positions. Nominees are selected based upon their personal efforts to improve their area district. Recipients are exemplary CTE administrators who are highly respected by their peers for their knowledge, leadership, and commitment to career and technical education. So congratulations, Mr. Funk. Next up, we'd like to say congratulations to Miss Calais Merritt, who could not be here this evening, just making sure. Miss Merritt is principal at Spring Mill Elementary School. On behalf of the InnoPower Conference Committee and all their sponsors and partners, we are thrilled to extend our heartfelt congratulations to Miss Merritt on her outstanding achievement and being awarded the Black Excellence in Education Award. Her dedication and commitment to Washington Township students and the field of education are truly commendable. Since its establishment in 2016, the Black Excellence in Education Award has served as a beacon of recognition for over 450 Black educators across Central Indiana. And these awards showcase Black excellence from individual triumph, overcoming all obstacles, and the long history of innovation. This year's winners will be celebrated on Thursday, August 29th, from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Ivy Tech Community College Culinary and Conference Center. So congratulations to Ms. Merritt.
She is at the Get Your Teach On conference right now.
Is that Get Your Teach On? Next up, he is here. Congratulations to Lieutenant Floyd Peterson. Come on up. Lieutenant Peterson was chosen as the Regional Exceptional Service Award recipient for Region 7 through the Indiana School Resource Association. INSRO seeks to acknowledge the accomplishments of a school resource officer who exemplifies the qualities of an SRO. This award is to recognize an individual who has gone above and beyond normal duties of an SRO to enhance their school and community through the SRO philosophy of counselor, teacher, and law enforcement officer. Lieutenant Peterson was recognized during an Ensro Award luncheon this past June. Congratulations, Lieutenant.
Put him in even.
I like
And then finally, we'd like to recognize and appreciate our professional partners this evening for the Greenbrier, Nora, and Fox Hill projects. So we'd like to recognize our construction managers of Shield Sexton and Harmon Construction. We'd like to recognize our architects, that's CSO Architects. And then we'd like to recognize Mr. Jeff Schroeder with Vision Construction, and Jeff could not be here this. On behalf of the entire district, we'd like to take this opportunity to extend our appreciation for your exceptional contributions to the construction of Greenbrier, Nora, and Fox Hill Elementary Schools. Your dedication and expertise in design and construction services have had a profound impact on our facilities, benefiting the students of Washington Township for generations to come. Your work with the district has been valued. The precision, problem solving, and unwavering commitment to excellence you have demonstrated has been crucial in the success of these projects. We know that a renovation with occupied spaces brings on many challenges. However, you work through them with a positive approach to ensure the learning environments were sustained. So we are truly grateful for all that you have done. We're also truly grateful for the community support in 2016 and 2020 that provided this optimal opportunity for our staff and our students. So thank you again to our professionals. And that concludes our board recognitions this evening. President.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We will now move on to superintendent's announcements.
Thank you, President George Davis, and good evening, community and school board. This is one of the most exciting times of year because it's a certain electricity in the air with back to school. I'm an educator because I love this time of year, and not many people do other than parents sending their kids back to us, but I just love it. And I have all of the back to school events in your board docs for tonight. If you would like to pop in any of those, I know the schools are always in the community happy to see you, but you have the complete listing by school as well as additional information. We also kicked off with all of our teachers who were able to attend through an Elevate conference. This is the second year. This year it was a 3-day conference and concluded today. Powerful learning throughout, not just from nationally renowned speakers, but some of our own teachers, administrators, and staff also presented their areas of expertise and skill set. So we're super excited for this week. I want to give special shout outs to the co-leads who organized for the past year, the past 3 days of a conference. It is no small undertaking on top of their day jobs, but Robin, Conti, and Rose did a wonderful job along with Crystal and Matt from technology, giving extraordinary support in addition to everyone who was involved from teaching and learning, the schools, as well as our student services department. We appreciate Eastwood for hosting this year as well. A few other announcements I have. As you know, we are ending the last of our ESSER dollars. So one of the last program updates is available for your review in the board documents. It is lengthy, but it is important because it's evaluating the effectiveness of the dollars that we used for ESSER to close some of the learning gaps that happened due to the pandemic. I also have our 23-24 SAT results and some comparisons there for you. Tonight, our teaching and learning and student services teams will give you an update formally on our quality assurance review for teaching and learning, the portion of our district strategic plan under focus area number 1, but that's an additional data set for you. I also have some updated school numbers just so that you can watch that. As you know, we've had extraordinary student enrollment growth in the past year, and we're watching all of that very carefully. So I'll be giving you updates at the upcoming board meetings as we begin to fill seats starting next week in our schools. Also, annually, as you know, when I became superintendent, I closed down central office the first few days of school, and we went out and we supported schools with all hands on deck approach for arrival and dismissal. The board has joined us for some years for that when you can, and you are invited once again. The sign up is there. We will close central office again, and it'll be all hands on deck approach to supporting our schools for the first couple of days. We also certainly was not a slow summer for our operations team that was just up here. It was a super busy summer doing the construction projects per the timelines that you're well aware of, but I wanted to provide you with an update from the project leadership team. You have an update per site, as well as some important upcoming dates that the board is invited to in bold in your superintendent announcements for the community. We are rededicating Fox Hill Elementary on Thursday, August 22nd at 5 p.m. And we're doing the brand new Northview Middle School dedication on July 30th next week at 5 p.m. And the entire community is invited to come out for those. We are going to have a very successful launch of school next week. And I look forward to giving you reports as we get going. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Woodson. Now comes time for comments from the public. Just a reminder that comments shall not exceed a total of 21 minutes. Each person wishing to speak may speak for a total of 3 minutes and may not speak twice unless everyone who has spoken, who has a desire to speak on that topic has spoken. And remember, we talk issues, not people during public comment. Comments from the public? Hearing none, we will move on to the approval of annual conflicts of interest. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, President George Davis, Dr. Woodson, members of the board. This evening, we do have 3 annual conflict of interest forms to review, and I would like to request your approval to accept them. First, Mr. Turner has submitted an annual conflict of interest form for continued disclosure that his spouse continues employment in Washington Township Schools. Second, Mrs. Horth Kruger has submitted an annual conflict of interest form for continued disclosure that her daughter continues employment in Washington Township Schools. And then finally, Dr. Woodson has submitted an annual conflict of interest form for continued disclosure that her spouse continues employment in Washington Township Schools. All details are on the forms in your board documents. At this time, I would like to request your vote to approve acceptance of these conflict of interest forms. Thanks.
I move we seek approval of the conflict of interest forms as presented by Dr. Taylor.
A second.
Been moved and properly second. Any discussion? We will now do a roll call vote. Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, Mrs. Horth Kruger.
Aye.
Okay, and I am an aye as well. Motion passes 0. And next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. Dr. Taylor.
President and members of the school board, I recommend that you approve the consent agenda for this meeting. The consent agenda includes approval of minutes of the June 12th, 2024 regular meeting, the June 26th, 2024 special board meeting, and the memoranda of the June 12th, 2024, June 26th, 2024, June 28th, 2024, June 29th, 2024, July 3rd, 2024, and the July 16th, 2024 executive sessions. Approval of 3 payroll calculation summary reports, a claims docket in the amount of $38,104,540.23, a special personnel item in accordance with Indiana Code 20-26-5-11.2, a human resources report containing for classified personnel 25 new hires indicated by numbers 250 through 274, 16 resignations as indicated by numbers 209 through 224, 2 retirements, numbers 23 and 24, 1 termination, number 37, 9 leaves, numbers 1 through 9, a certified personnel and for 33 new appointments, numbers 43 through 75, and 12 resignations, numbers 148 through 159. There is 1 non-competitive grant for your review and approval this evening. That is the 2023-2024 Refugee School Impact Grant, totaling $93,490.66. That document is provided for you in your board packet. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding the consent agenda at this time.
Board, any questions?
No, if there are no further questions, I move that we approve approve the consent agenda as presented by Dr. Taylor. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Oh, yeah, I know. Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, Mrs. Horth Krueger,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kaiser now for a very special announcement.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Woodson, President George Davis, and members of the board. As the board knows, over the course of the last several weeks, we have conducted a comprehensive search for a new principal at North Central High School that included a survey with over 215 student and parent responses and 3 rounds of interviews that included over 100 members of the Washington Township community. I'd like to personally thank you as members of the board for your participation in the interview process. I'm pleased tonight to highlight the fact that in approving the consent agenda a few minutes ago, you approved the appointment of a highly talented educator to serve as the new principal of North Central High School. Mr. Rent, will you please join me at the podium? Mr. Jagger Rent began his career in education serving as a teacher of business foundations, business law, and computer applications before transitioning to a dean position at Indianapolis Metropolitan High School. He then served as the principal at Monument Lighthouse College Prep Academy, and for the last 10 years, he has served as an administrator in Hamilton Southeastern Schools, serving as a dean and high school assistant principal for 8 years at Hamilton Southeastern High School. And he has spent the last 2 years serving as principal of Hamilton Southeastern Intermediate Junior High School. There's a lot going on. Mr. Rent received both his bachelor's degree and his master's degree in educational administration from Ball State University. So you know what's coming. Chirp, chirp, Dr. Woodson. Chirp, chirp. In recognition of his fine work as an educator, Mr. Rent has received a Hometown Heroes Award from Jamie Bower Magazine, an Excellence in Education Award from Marian University, and has been named as a member of the Beech Grove High School Hall of Fame. Perhaps most impressively, the Hamilton Southeastern High School Black Student Union annually names a Jagger Rent Education Award winner in honor of Mr. Rent. Mr. Rent's hiring is also, in doing so, he is joining his wife, Fanae, who I understand he has known since kindergarten. I said kindergarten. Here in Washington Township, Mrs. Rent was recently named as the new assistant principal of Eastwood Middle School, and I am pleased to welcome Mr. Rent, Mrs. Rent, their children, and all of Team Rent to their new home here in Washington Township. I'm going to turn things over.
Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. I truly am thankful to God for this opportunity. And board, I thank you for your vote of confidence tonight. Dr. Woodson, I appreciate you, and I thank you and your team for a rigorous and thorough process. Dr. Pettigrew and Dr. Seaver have been nothing short of excellent throughout this whole process. I'm just so excited to be here, and I can't wait to get started. I do have a host of people that I'd like to recognize and introduce you to. My wife, Fanae. I'm glad she didn't interview for the job because she would have got it. So she's the MVP of our family. And my oldest daughter, Jaylyn, my son, Jagga, and my daughter, Journey, are here with me as well. And they'll be joining the Washington Township family as well. My mom and dad are here. My heroes are in the house. My other mother, she actually birthed Fanae, but we share her. She's really mine. My second grade teacher is here, Miss Parrish, and 38 years ago.
Wow.
She is the reason I'm in education now. And so I'm just so thankful that she's here, and she's followed me since we left. And I wanted to do for other students what she did for me in second grade. Our favorite cousin is here, Ashley. She came with me and her dad. My uncle Mark is here. My little brother is here, Jacoby. My niece, Jasmine, my sister, and her boyfriend are here as well. And in the back, my former principal, Miss Almer, is here. She's actually taken over at the Hitch for me, and I couldn't think of a better person to do that. And my brother is here, and people look at me funny when I say he's my brother because we have different skin color. But Jim Self is here as well. I appreciate him. So wanted to just introduce you to my tribe because this is why I'm here today. So appreciate it and looking forward to getting started.
Let's go. Love all of the black and red. You get a work bag. Just turn right here. There we go. There we go. Yes, absolutely.
Up here and say hi too. You guys know.
Love all the black and red. Love it.
And your family with us. Good. And you all wore the colors. You don't.
Good. Love to hear that word.
Thank you.
For inspiring him, so we him now.
Wow, good.
All right, smile big, Team Rent. You guys better come to ball games representing this black and red. We'll see you guys in the stands. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
What an exciting time to be a Panther. I got one of those. So does Miss Fry. Okie dokie. Anybody looking to escape? Now is your opportunity. Okay, we will move on to our action items now. First action item is the approval of the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, Instructional Coaching, Professional Development. Dr. Sieber.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Woodson, and members of the board. I am here tonight seeking your review and approval of the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, Instructional Coaching, and Professional Development contract. The support and services that the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, which we refer to as NIET, will continue to enhance our professional development and coaching model at North Central High School for the upcoming school year, if approved. NIET provides strategic training to the North Central instructional coaches to help build their instructional coaching capacity, as well as assist them in the design, implementation, and facilitation of highly effective professional development. Administrators and department chairs will also be taking place in training related to observation and feedback, evaluation, and teacher leadership. This support enhances our Elevate core target practice walkthroughs, feedback to teachers, and data analysis. The board has comprehensive information about this item in your board docs, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board, any questions?
There are no further questions. I move approval of the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, Instructional Coaching / Professional Development as presented by Dr. Sever.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel?
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, Mrs. Worth Kruger,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Seaver. Oh, you're still with us. Next, we have the approval of the dual language immersion pilot program grant. Also, Dr. Seaver.
Yes. So I am also here tonight seeking your review and approval of the Dual Language Immersion Pilot Program Grant. Funds from this grant will be used to support and expand the Dual Language Immersion Program at Willow Lake Elementary. Specifically, Washington Township will use the funds for administrator and teacher professional development, as well as classroom materials. You also have information about this grant in your board docs, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board, any questions?
No further questions. I move we approve the dual language immersion pilot grant program as presented by Dr. Seaver.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, Mrs. Worth Kruger,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Seaver. Next, we have the approval of the Panorama Student Survey Proposal. Mrs. Dodson.
Good evening, Dr. Woodson, Madam President, and school board members. Tonight, I'm here to seek your approval to move forward with an agreement with Panorama Education to utilize the Panorama Student Survey for the next 2 school years. As you know, Washington Township Schools was recently awarded the IDOE Student-Centered Support Award/Grant to celebrate the work we have done and continue to support efforts in the development and implementation of comprehensive student supports in our district. Our grant application, which you approved in February, was fully funded. This grant provides us with the opportunity to utilize the Panorama Student Survey to capture student voice to guide us in intentionally addressing student well-being and learning outcomes. The use of the Panorama Student Survey is aligned with Priority 1 of our strategic plan, and we will analyze student survey data to help us develop programming that meets the social emotional needs of our students. It's worth noting that beginning in summer 2023, House Enrolled Act 1447 does require an opt-in, opt-out procedure. We have developed an implementation plan that's aligned with the requirements outlined in this legislation, and we're prepared to implement that plan this fall. You can find additional details in your board docs. And I'd like to seek your approval to enter into the agreement with Panorama Education for a 2-year contract for the Student Service Surveys platform. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board, any questions? Mrs. Worth Kruger, I want to make sure that I'm not ignoring you if you have questions.
I don't have any questions at this time, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fensel,
If there are no further questions, I'm approval of the Panorama Student Survey Proposal as presented by Mrs. Dobson.
Second.
it's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Okay, now, Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Bill. Aye.
is it a full moon? Ms. Fry, Mrs. Worth Kruger,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Kielazzi. Woo. All right. Next, we have the approval of the agreement with Advancing Public Schools. Dr. Kaiser.
Thank you, Dr. Woodson, President George Davis, and members of the board. I come to you this evening seeking your approval to continue our agreement with Advancing Public Schools to provide media services at Northview Middle School. This arrangement has been in place since the 2019-2020 school year and has been found to be of substantial benefit to Northview as a school. Mr. Hakeem has wholeheartedly expressed his wish to continue this arrangement as we have the last several years. Pleased to answer any questions that the board may have about the agreement that is in your board documents for this evening.
Board, any questions?
Go ahead. No, sorry.
I move that we approve the agreement with Advancing Public Schools as presented by Dr.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, Mrs. Worth Kruger,
Aye.
And I am an I as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Dr. Kaiser. Okay. Moving on. Next, we have the approval of 2020 capital construction project change orders. Mr. Boots.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, Dr. Woodson and members of the board. I am here this evening to ask for your approval of 4 project change orders on 4 individual projects. Those change orders are number IN 21002-25 to Smoot Construction for the CEC ELC project. Change order number 007 to Shields Sexton Harmon Joint Venture for Fox Hill renovation. Change order number 004 to Temperature Control Services for Eastwood 2020 renovation. And change order number 004, Temperature Control Services for the North Central Phase 1 project. I am very pleased to announce that the financial impact of these 4 change orders is a decrease, and I'd love to repeat that, a decrease of $751,093.88. And just to comment, the majority of that, of course, is the settlement of the shared savings account that is an integral part of the construction manager as contractor contract form that we're using on these projects. And with that, I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Mr. Fensel.
Is any particular reason for the significance of that decrease?
Yes. So the one of the aspects of CMC is that there's the ability to insert monies into the guaranteed maximum price to cover with scope errors and things of that nature. It's a protective device to the CMC, but also us in a shared savings account. What it really signifies is that our Smoot team did a very good job in what we call scoping the project because there were very many gaps in the coverage of the scope. Doesn't mean we didn't have a lot of change orders. So this money is not all coming back, but most of it is going to be funding the change orders, which were misscope in the design or owner request items, things of that nature.
And it's probably something that arises more frequently with new construction when
Yes,
there's less
Although
certainties.
that is true. Yes.
Mr. Turner.
No, I was just going to make a comment, and Mr. Boots kind of covered it. The CMC, I remember back when we were rolling this out and we are debating whether or not to go to the CMC route, which builds in this, I won't call it a guarantee, but a way to get money back if they save money. So I just wanted to say thanks for the team for,
Yeah.
pursuing that, and this shows what can happen. They do save money, so appreciate that. But there,
There are no more questions. I move that we approve the 2020 capital construction project change orders as presented by Ms. Boots.
Second?
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Thank you for the refund. We will take it. Mr. Fensel.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
aye.
Ms. Fry. Mrs. Horth Krueger.
Aye.
I am an I as well. Thank you, Mr. Oh, motion carries 5-0. You are still with us. Next, we have the approval of the North Central High School Phase 6A GMP for the former Northview Middle School exterior finish system repairs and warehouse re-roofing. Mr. Boots.
Thank you, Madam President. Indeed, I am asking for approval of, and I have to read through this, AIA document A133-219 Exhibit A for the guaranteed maximum price amendment to the Skillman Davis contract for Phase 6A, the former Northview Middle School exterior insulated finish system repairs and warehouse re-roof dated June 24th of 2024. Bids were taken on June 20th. The bids were vetted. Pre-construction or pre-award meetings, conferences were held, and the apparent low bidder has resulted in generating this GMP for Phase 6A. And I will note that this is the first phase of a much larger project, of course. We did this to take advantage of the weather, try to get ahead of the winter, because the finish system and the roofing at the warehouse is in its final stages. So we did it in a phased construction project as we have a couple of others. And we will be coming back to you later in the fall with the balance of that project cost. So the projected cost, or excuse me, the total final impact is $995,192. And of course, comes from capital referendum funding.
Mr.
Happy
Fentz.
to answer any questions.
I was looking at a bid tab and there were four bidders and the prices varied a fair amount. I was just curious if you could comment on that. I'm not sure I understand the bid tab.
Yeah, one of the bidders significantly missed the scope of the project, and it was, in my parlance, it's a blunder. So he withdrew his bid. And the second one had just an estimating error and admitted to it, which is why we've got such a variance. But it was interesting to note that the bids came in almost right on our estimate. So we were very comfortable with what we ended up with.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I move approval of the North Central High School Phase 6A BMP for the former Northview Middle School exterior finished systems repair and warehouse re-roof as presented by the Skillman Corporation and Mr. Boots.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
Mrs. Horth Krueger.
Aye.
I am an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boots. Next, we have the approval and adoption of a second reading of policies D100, D125, D150, D175, D200, G125, G150, G275, and G375. 375, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Woods, and members of the board. I bring to you this evening the second reading of these policies and approval for adoption. And this is after we have already done the first reading that we did in June. Also worked with the board liaisons on these policies and also executive leaders within the district. So we'll start out with policy D100 is the district's organization, and this replaces policy 1100, and this is a required policy. Next is the policy D125, which is the evaluation of the superintendent, and this replaces policy 1240, and this is required by Indiana code. Next, we have policy D150, board superintendent relationship. This policy is replaced by policy 1210, and the law does not require this specific policy, but it's based on law. And so we wanted to continue with what we've done in the past with our policies. Next, we have policy D175, and that's the board staff communications. This replaces policies 3112 and 4112. And this also is optional, but helps create helpful in creating structure within our organization. Next, we have policy D200, and that is standard of care and supervision of students. And this replaces policy 1613, 3213, 4213, and 8660. And this is a requirement of the 2020 title regulations. Next, we have policy G125, criminal organization activity. This replaces policies 5518, 5840, and this policy is required to be posted in student handbooks, and we are working with teaching and learning to ensure that that they have all the same documents included in the handbooks, and this is required by Indiana law. Next, we have policy G150, registered sex or violent offenders, and this replaces policy 8470 and is required by law. Next, we have policy G275, animals on school property. This replaces policy 8390 and is required by law, and also has an attached service animal registration form for those seeking this, this service to be with their students. Next, we have policy G375, and that's use of school facilities. This replaces policies 7510, 7510.01, 7550, and this is required and also has a form for release and of agreement and facility use updated terms and conditions that we received from our facilities department. And then also you'll notice in your board docs from the last time we had a first reading, and that was a policy G 425, which is Pledge of Allegiance and Moments of Silence. And this replaced a policy 8800. This is a not required policy, and the proposal from the group was to remove this entire policy since this is our regular practice and is not required by law. I would be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Board, any questions?
Skip my usual comment. This
Uh,
not time for the comment.
If there are no further questions, I move approval of each of the policies that Mrs. Smith had presented.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye. Mrs.
Worth Krueger.
Aye.
I am an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Next, we have the approval of the code of conduct. Dr. Pettigrew.
Good evening, Board President Davis, Superintendent Woodson, and members of the board. I'm here to request the approval of the 24-25 Code of Conduct. As a reminder, we established a district handbook team to review both the student handbooks and the Code of Conduct this spring. Through that process, stakeholders had the opportunity to provide feedback for the Code of Conduct, and that included district administrators. Our Code of Conduct ensures that each of our schools maintains a safe and respectful, productive educational environment, and that we are establishing clear expectations for students and for staff. Please note that there were no major changes to the Code of Conduct this year. We believe the document is clear and it only required minor changes. And I'll give one example. Inciting behaviors is an example that was a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3. But after discussion with the team, we also added it as a level 4, just to give some flexibility to administrators in the building. At this time, if there are no questions, we request approval of the 24-25 Code of Conduct, of which you have a copy.
Ms. Fry?
Just one very small question.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't have a chance to ask earlier, but on the bus infractions specifically, the chart for the progressive discipline guidance for bus infractions, I noticed there was a new addition, it looked like, for cell phone noncompliance. And I know all about the cell phone stuff in the buildings, but what are the cell phone rules on buses? Like,
Well, students are allowed to obviously have cell phones on the bus, but there could be instances where there is a distraction because of a cell phone. Sometimes you see young people recording incidents on the bus. So it gives us the flexibility if there are challenges related to a cell phone, that we have that in the Code of Conduct.
yeah, I was thinking like when somebody plays a video really loud without headphones, and if they were told to shut it up. Okay, I was confused on that one because I know
Absolutely.
it's a big deal in the buildings.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was my only question. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I move we approve the code of conduct as presented by Dr. Pettigrew.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
Mrs. Worth Krueger,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Pettigrew. Oh, do you have another? Oh, you're still up for the info item. Oh my goodness. See, I was getting excited because that was my final action item as president. Okay, we are done with our action items and we have one information item. Year in review of district strategic plan priority 1 for equitable achievement. Dr. Pettigrew and team.
So again, good evening. We are here to briefly share a high-level overview of our priority goal 1. We have our team here. We have Tim Blom, who is elementary K-5. We have Rick Doss, who's outgoing as grades 6 through 8. And we have Dr. Seaver, grades 9 through 12. So we first are proud of our initiatives this year to build a shared understanding around culturally responsive practices in each of our buildings. We've achieved this in many ways. So first, the Teaching and Learning Department has collaborated with building administrators through our DELT meetings. We utilize this time to assess and address some of our systemic inequities in our learning environments and create solutions for those challenges. We've also continued our partnership with Child Advocates to ensure that all building and district level administrators complete the 2-day training Interrupting Racism for Children. And we are pleased that over 100 staff have completed that training to date. Our directors work with their principals and schools regarding performance and discipline data. And through that work, they have intentionally focused on identifying trends and patterns in our performance and discipline data. It also allows us proper resource allocation. Understanding their data helps guide some of those decisions about where to allocate resources for maximum impact. Our directors also work with the principals to analyze disparities in the data, and then we have those discussions once a month with our DELT team. The use of proactive discipline practices is another component of our DSP, and our buildings are intentional about restorative practices. Through trauma-informed professional learning opportunities, they have utilized this approach to foster a positive school climate, improve student-teacher relationships, and contribute to a better academic and social outcome for all students. And again, as stated in our DSP, these approaches promote a data-driven decision-making process. We are especially proud about our work with DELT and our student support team. So we have increased our understanding of district systems such as SEL, tiered interventions, and we are intentional about our SEL program with Be Good People, Second Step, and Success Bound. As you are aware, our QAR process has yielded robust discussion around student performance. And in the upcoming year, we have decided to include principals and administrators in an additional QAR other than their own, so that they can provide constructive feedback to their colleagues, as well as learn about initiatives in other buildings that they would not have learned about had they not been in that process. Another strategy, and Dr. Woodson mentioned this, was our Elevate conference, which concluded just a few hours ago. And it included over 100 sessions and 3 dynamic keynote speakers. It was aligned with our Elevate framework. And some sessions, as an example, creating a thinking classroom for mathematics, grades 6 to 12. We had Gorski, Ditching Deficit Views, Educational Equity for Families Experiencing Poverty. And then we had SEL sessions, Nurturing Growth, Unveiling SEL's 3 signature practices. And that created a sense of urgency around all of our goals as we launch a new year. One strategy that we have used this year and we will continue to use is the Elevate walkthroughs. And we are pleased that during this past year, there were 1,746 Elevate walkthroughs K-12. Our cumulative data reflected many areas of promise in that data, such as the use of inclusive and asset-based language regarding students and their abilities, and active engagement and collaboration in all of our classrooms. Finally, we are intentional about our school improvement plans, and the building leaders are currently working with their directors on their school improvement plans. And we plan to provide feedback this year, but we've also added to that an opportunity for principals and administrators in their building to present their school improvement plan at the beginning of the year, which will allow us to better understand some of their challenges going into this year. At this time, you will hear from Mr. Tim Blum.
Good evening. I will be sharing information tonight, primarily focused on improving attendance, social emotional learning, and a bit more detail about those Elevate classroom walkthroughs, which, as you know, is one of our key strategies for aligning teaching and learning throughout the district. One of our district strategies is centered around developing preventative measures and stronger community partnerships to intervene with truancy challenges. At the mid-year QAR, we shared information and data about truancy reports filed with DCS. That data actually showed that we don't typically utilize that approach to navigate truancy because punitive strategies are not typically successful, and they are certainly not relationship building. Furthermore, truancy is not actually a crime in Marion County. In response to that mid-year data, our district will implement a truancy prevention plan that includes proactive strategies to promote regular school attendance and on-time school arrival throughout next school year. Additionally, parents and caregivers will receive written notification of unexcused absences when their student accumulates 4, 5, 8, and 10 unexcused absences.
If students continue to accumulate unexcused absences, school staff will work with the parent caregiver, and when applicable, they will work with the student to develop an attendance plan that will identify barriers to attending school. There will be an intentional focus on the school-family partnership in an effort to promote regular school attendance and decrease unexcused absences. Much like we share academic goals and data with our school communities, we intend to also set and share attendance goals with students and families. In order to continue aligning our work across the district, one of the strategies that we implemented a couple of years ago was to create a common teaching and learning vision and coaching feedback form to be used in the classrooms, focusing primarily on lesson delivery and engagement. The Teaching and Learning Department created the Elevate Walkthrough Protocol 2 years ago, and we utilize that data periodically at the district level, while schools also review the data specific for their building. Based upon feedback from school leaders, we'll be updating the walkthrough form to be more focused and intentional on our look-fors to help provide more specific and actionable data. For the 2024-2025 school year, we will also focus on one specific area of practice each quarter in order to help narrow the scope of the walkthroughs, as well as the support that we can provide based upon that data. Finally, I'd like to share about the implementation of social emotional learning practices using the district SEL curriculum and research-based educational neuroscience practices with a race-conscious lens. At the elementary level, each classroom starts their day with a morning meeting focused on creating a positive classroom community and preparing students for the rigors of the school day. We currently utilize the second step SEL curriculum for the morning meeting and to provide common language and expectations throughout the school day. During the upcoming school year, we will actually be reviewing our SEL curriculum and piloting several options beyond second step. Earlier this month, we again provided training for elementary educators on responsive classroom. An overview of second step and responsive classroom techniques are also provided during the New Teacher Academy. For the upcoming school year, we'll pilot a few other research-based SEL curriculum options in different schools to help inform a more comprehensive program evaluation next year. At Willow Lake and Fox Hill last school year, we also started with new elementary school counselors, which supplemented the SEL curriculum provided by classroom teachers. In our middle schools, it was determined that we needed to reevaluate the use of second step at that level. So a multidisciplinary team was brought together to explore SEL curriculum options better suited for middle school learners. Moving forward, we'll be utilizing Success Bound during advisory, which integrates SEL with college and career readiness. Be Good People is a program that will be utilized as a Tier 2 and Tier 3 SEL intervention for students who need more support. School counselors, school social workers, student support specialists, deans, and others were trained on Be Good People during April of 2024. For the upcoming school year, our homeroom schedule at the high school will include SEL lessons. Building and district leaders are collaborating to determine a path forward that is impactful and efficient. And across all three levels, school counselors engage in intensive professional learning regarding data-informed practices, identifying root cause, and intervening to support students' social emotional well-being, all of which is applied through an equity and race-conscious lens. And I'll now hand it over to Mr. Doss for his final time at the podium.
He's sad about that.
Thank you, Mr. Blum. Good evening. My focus this evening is going to be on how the schools incorporate data, whether that's using it to identify how we can better support students academically or what we can do to support them with regards to behavior challenges. And each school dedicates significant time each month as they focus on academic and behavioral data through the MTSS process in grades K through 8, obviously elementary, middle, and through their grade level support teams at the high school. At the elementary level, this may be 1 meeting a month or 2 meetings a month, depending on the volume or depending on the structure that's created within the school. At the middle school, it's 2 meetings a month. Basically, 1 meeting is focused on academic support and how we can better support students in that road versus the second meeting, which is typically focused on behavior. Now, students and how we can create prescriptive plans for them, but also things that we might need to look at school level in terms of what can we do to better learning environment for our students. In the district strategic plan, I provided a link that shows you what the last look like, and you can see by looking at that particular data point that it's a significant amount of data that each school is looking at, that the data teams are looking at, again, focused on not only academics, but on behavior as well. In fact, one of the points that we track on a regular basis happens to be the office referrals, and including focusing specifically on continuous classroom disruption, disrespect and refusal to comply, as that was a big part of what we talked about when we developed this particular plan. And thankfully, the data is trending in the right way. We saw a 5% reduction from the 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year. Still plenty of work to do, and we don't have it perfected at this point, but things are trending in the right direction. With that, I'd like to also talk about some academic pieces that we're looking at for next year. Obviously, you know that NWEA has been a big part of the way we measure student progress and over the last few years, but we're moving away from that for the 24-25 school year. It has been used as a benchmarking tool, but also a way to monitor student progress throughout the school year. There are a couple of reasons why we're doing that. One, we believe that we need to place a greater emphasis on getting students to the level of proficiency or at grade level in the areas of reading and math. While growth is important, clearly important, there needs to be a greater sense of urgency to get students at grade level so that they can put themselves in a great position to succeed beyond life at North Central High School. In other words, making a year of growth is just not enough for students who are not at grade level. We need to make sure that they demonstrate not only that they're growing, but also that they understand the content on a high level at their particular grade. Secondly, as a district, we'll be piloting the new checkpoint assessments that are directly linked to the iLearn assessment that will be administered in grades 3 through 8. These 3 assessments should be a great tool to determine whether students have the fundamental understanding of the standards that will be assessed on the iLearn assessment. Since students may take each assessment more than once, teachers should have a great sense of whether or not each student is in a good place prior to sitting for the iLearn exam, and at the same time have a good sense of what kinds of things they need to intervene with in terms of making students putting students at a point where they're successful on that assessment. In addition, the checkpoints align well with our PLC and our MTSS process, so it makes sense that it allows the work to be extremely tight, extremely targeted, and extremely focused for our teachers. And that will be a plus for sure, and it's something that we haven't always been great at. Time required to administer the 3 checkpoints also creates a situation where the addition of NWA would put students in a position where they have spend way too much time assessing and not enough time focused on learning. And so that's one of the other reasons why we felt like we needed to move away from NWA. The grades that are not linked to the checkpoints as another way to gauge student understanding beyond the assessments created by teachers. The elementary schools will use Amplify, and the high school will use ExactPath to measure student progress, in addition to obviously what's happening in the individual classrooms. The curriculum coordinators and the instructional coaches are also involved in this work. It's critical that they have a strong sense of how to better support students and teachers regarding instructional practices and intervention supports. In addition, the building-based teams that I mentioned earlier regarding the monthly data dives are also engaged in this work as they develop prescriptive plans and behavior, not only academic, but behavior as well for individual students and to better meet their needs. That I'll turn it over to Dr. Steve.
Thank you. Tonight, I'd like to share with you some key highlights and updates regarding grades 9 through 12, as well as our K through 12 multilingual education programs. First, our North Central grade level support teams continued to meet weekly throughout the second semester, demonstrating a shared commitment of administrators, school counselors, school social workers, and student support specialists to support our students. The teams regularly refined our student support specialist caseloads based on evolving student needs. And across all levels, teams, similar to what Mr. Blom was mentioning with regards to attendance, we did notice significant challenges with attendance at all grade levels. So going into next year, we are going to be putting in some new tiered interventions for attendance in partnership with our coordinator of student support services, Crystal Hazlitt. For our students who are falling behind in credits, they participate in credit recovery courses at North Central, and in cases where students have fallen significantly behind, the grade level support teams continue to consider placement at True North Academy. We have seen significant student success at True North, but we also recognize we have opportunities for growth in that space with curriculum, staffing, transportation, and space. We are actively brainstorming solutions in each of these areas. In terms of targeted academic support in grades 9 through 12, we have continued pairing Algebra 1 with an Algebra 1 lab class for students identified as needing additional assistance. The grade data for these students this year has shown a positive impact on their performance in Algebra 1, so we are going to stay the course with that. But in addition, next year, we are going to be putting some new strategies in place in the math department, including piloting a mastery learning approach to fill skill gaps and accelerate students to grade level math skills in preparation for the SAT. In terms of our E&L department, we have been focusing on collaborative efforts to enhance our multilingual learners' experiences at all levels. Professional development is a key focus area amid our increase in multilingual learners. Our 3 E&L instructional coaches work directly with sheltered and integrated teachers and facilitate school-wide professional learning to advance E&L best practices. This summer, we are so proud to have offered multiple 2-day in-person PSYOP training sessions to elementary, middle, and high school teachers. At the high school level, our E&L teachers are working directly with sheltered and integrated staff members across various subjects and grade levels. This collaboration aims to front-load content vocabulary for multilingual learners to make course content more accessible. Additionally, our North Central E&L department chair has started a sheltered professional learning community for teachers of sheltered content courses. In early of March 2024, the J. Everett Light and North Central leaders collaborated to promote and enroll E&L students in the new building management course that will be offered at JEL in the fall of 2024. Our E&L instructional coach also continues to actively support JEL instructors, and JEL staff have been very responsive to our efforts to implement E&L best practices in their courses. Across the district, we have prioritized multilingual learner immunization compliance to ensure that they stay in school in partnership with our Student Services Department. Our E&L staff, particularly at the high school level, has played a crucial role in the immunization clinics in this past year, handling family communications and providing interpretation services. We've also been refining a communication pamphlet in our primary languages to guide both current and new multilingual families through our schools, procedures, and platforms. In conclusion, our teaching and learning department remains committed to breaking down barriers, enhancing our programs, and ensuring quality education and support for every student. We are proud of the progress, but we recognize there is always room for improvement. We will continue to adapt and innovate to meet the evolving needs of our diverse student body. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Fry.
Sorry, that was a lot of information without slides or anything to kind of reference, so I'm going to do my best to remember. This is actually for Mr. Doss, and I was listening and I was looking at where I thought that lined up in the document. So if I'm missing information, and that's my fault, I'm sorry. But what I think I heard you say was a pretty significant change in terms of, outside of iLearn, kind of how we're looking at where, so I heard about these checkpoints, right? And then did I hear we're going to stop doing NWEA?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Can you, again, I was listening and I read what was on here, but that's a big change from what we're all used to. Can you just break that down a little more clearly? Like what are the changes, and is it for this coming year, or did you already start doing it?
For this coming year. Yeah. Basically obviously the state has moved forward with these checkpoints, and they will officially be in place for all school districts during the 25-26 school year. But they gave school districts the opportunity of being part of the pilot this year. And what that looks like, in fact, years ago, we had, prior to, it's probably going back about a decade, there was something called Acuity that schools used. And basically, assessment, and I believe there were 2 of them that were given basically between the beginning of the school year and the time that we took at that time ISTEP. And those particular assessments gave teachers and schools a sense of, were these students, they were predicted, gave them a sense of whether or not students were on par to pass ISTEP at that time. And so what they've done, everything's come full circle. They've created these checkpoint assessments that are, again, almost like mini chunks, almost if you think of it in an old traditional way, like a quiz before you'd have a big test. But they've taken this and put it into chunks, and that basically teachers know that between this window and this window, you need to teach these particular concepts. We take the assessment, and then teachers then have a good sense. Do our students know, are they on par? Are they, and they're all, but let me back up. The one also key difference is they're only grade level standards, whereas NWA was an adaptive assessment. So as I continue to get questions right as a student, it continues to take me up beyond my grade level. And so while it's a great assessment, it really doesn't focus specifically on grade level standards. Well, these checkpoints, much like iLearn, only focus on grade level standards. So basically the students take the test. You can administer it multiple times. So if I'm a teacher, I can determine, okay, well, I'm going to administer this assessment again because Johnny didn't do really well. I'm going to do some reteaching, maybe do some small group instruction, a variety of things to get Johnny and other students who fall into a similar situation on board, and then reassess them in hopes that they're moving further along. So there are 3 of those over the course of the year. So our thinking was, and as I said, they can be administered more than once. So we're going to dedicate a fair amount of new time to the checklist or the checkpoints versus in addition to taking iLearn at the end of the school year. So in doing so, we didn't feel like NWA could still be administered because we spent way too much time on testing and not enough time on instruction. Without going into too much more detail, does that give you a sense of?
Yeah, and is that all K through 8?
Actually, right now, iLearn is only grades 3 through 8.
Oh, right.
So that's the same thing. Now, we did used to administer NWEA K through 8. So they'll be doing some assessments in grades K1 and 2 because they won't be impacted by the checkpoints. And but they'll, again, that was, I spoke to the Amway, some things internally, some tools that the elementary already has in place they can use to determine whether students are progressing as they should across their grade level, even though their grade level is not assessed through iLearn.
Okay.
And the high school will be looking closely because obviously they haven't been part of NWA for the last few years because it wasn't course specific. And obviously now that they moved to SAT, we want to get a sense of where they are. They'll be looking at some software to look at courses like Algebra 1 to make sure students are progressing and that they know what that part of the math curriculum that's focused on the SATs.
And so these checkpoint assessments, these are provided by DOE the same way
Correct.
iLearn is provided by DOE.
Correct.
Okay. Trying to figure out how to formulate my follow-up question. In the past, and I know iStep turned into iLearn and they're constantly changing the test, right? But in the past, what I've heard is that, part of the reason we did NWEA is because back in the day when it was iStep, it just told us pass fail. It didn't really give us any data that would actually really help the teachers figure out in a more granular way, like what specific areas of, forgive me, I'm not an educator, so this is my lay explanation. I guess my concern, what I'm asking you to reassure me about is, given how many of us feel about tests like iStep and iLearn, do we have faith that what we're going to be getting from the DOE that's sort of aligned with that is going to really give us what we need, not just to know whether or not our kids are going to pass iLearn, but to know what we really need to be doing for our kids to learn, not just pass the test, but learn?
Sure, they should be because they're driven by the standards. And obviously, iLearn was created to assess standards. But again, we're like you. I don't think we've had a shift as a team to believe that one assessment is the best way to determine whether students don't understand what we want them to know. But in this, since the checkpoints are focused on grade level standards, which is what our teachers are supposed to be teaching, we believe that this tool, coupled with our PLC process and our MTSS process, give us a lot of information that we haven't had previously and put our students in a position where they're more likely to pass iLearn, which again, not to say that you pass that, you're in an amazing place and life's going to be wonderful and rosy for you, but it also is an assessment that in a sense says that if the students do well on that, we feel like they've mastered the assessment, that the things that we believe third graders through eighth graders should master by the time they leave each of those individual grade levels.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. I'm not sure who can answer it. So, and I'm going to admit that I have not actually looked at this data myself, but, historically, attendance has been linked to academic success, right? You come to school, you do well. So how do we, is there a plan to handle the anomaly? So the student who knows they're doing well, but maybe just doesn't want to come to school this week and is starting to have attendance issues, but still doing well. Will we use the same supports that we're using for all students, or is there some way that'll differentiate to convince them that, yes, you are doing well, but you still should come to school?
So I would say that a big part of that also is how do we engage kids in the classroom? And so if we have more discussion on the front end around what student engagement looks like and how we can tap into students' funds of knowledge, then they will want to come to school. So it's a both and conversation. But we are working heavily with student supports, with Dr. Skavinsky, Dr. Swed, Crystal Haslett, Jen Dotson, and looking at attendance. We've also added that as a goal this year in our school improvement plans, that we want to see 95% attendance in our buildings. And we're looking at it on a more granular level. So we want to look at it more consistently, more often, more frequently, as opposed to in QAR, what does our attendance look like? And so we are looking at that process with student supports.
Well, okay, so I guess now I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
95% across the board.
Across the board.
I'm going to assume there are some schools that have a higher hill to climb.
Well, yeah, nationwide,
Right,
attendance
right.
is trending downward, right? And
Right.
so that is a bigger hill to climb for some schools,
Okay. Okay.
but it's still a goal.
Right. No, it's good to have goals. You have a target.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you. Mrs. Horth Kruger, did you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
I just do want to ask one question, and you can answer it today or if you can or not. So listening to all the information you just gave us on different programs, different things you're working on and trying to assess, increase achievement, because there's so many different things happening, and because we have such a diverse population of students, it's just, you have to do different things for different students. How will you assess whether the program or whatever you're doing is correlated to the success? In other words, if you're doing multiple things with the student, how do you know what's really helping them so that you don't maybe have to do it anymore with others? You know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot, so if you haven't thought about that, that's fine. But I just had the question because there was a lot.
No, it's definitely, it's a real challenge that we recognize. And to be honest, coming out of the initial response to COVID, it was kind of amplified because when the ESSER dollars came in, one of the challenges that we put out to schools and educators was like, hey, think big, get creative, try different approaches. And then at the beginning of this year, we looked and we might have dozens of different things happening throughout, 8 elementary schools, for example. And so our curriculum team has really spent a lot of time looking at, okay, what does the research tell us? What is really backed in, by these curriculum producers and companies that we believe in, that are tried and true. That shift to the science of reading has been super helpful because that's really aligned our focus on like, okay, these things that we were trying aren't even on the table anymore. We've shifted here. And so we've narrowed those down. So for example, in the elementary, as you know, we are introducing a brand new written curriculum, which will be implemented across all classrooms. And then our tier 2 options are down to 1 or 2 programs, our tier 3 So we're not completely there, but we feel like we've narrowed the scope of what's available quite a bit. And then through the MTSS process, that will certainly be helpful. I will say one thing that we found looking at our schools who are showing significant growth over the last couple of years is that it has less to do with the written curriculum and much more to do with the intentional, focused instruction and the strategies that they're using to make sure the expectations are set for the 24 students sitting at the carpet, that they're all fully engaged, that they're all answering every question. And so we've been looking at those schools and those classrooms that are really showing growth and trying to share that and bring that into the other spaces, because that's really really where we're seeing it. It's not as much in the program as it is the people and being really intentional, teaching bell to bell and things like that, and really emphasizing that and having those consistently high expectations and partnering with families and those other pieces.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? The narrowing down for the tier 2, is that based on your evaluation of the multiple programs, or was it kind of just a shot in the dark?
No. Specific, and because I use the science of reading, I will say that there were throughout the process of the program evaluation, the curricular review, we piloted several programs, as you know, and within that, we also piloted intervention programs. And we worked with we got some guidance from the DOE and some of our partner districts around us to give us feedback on like, hey, what's moving the needle? And when we piloted those programs, and I will just put out there, Clearwater, I don't know, we've had a chance to celebrate this, but the state goal by 2027 is to have 95% pass iRead 3. And coming out of the summer, Clearwater hit 96%. So it's a huge celebration. And we know that one of the things they did with very intentional instruction in phonics and use of a program called Foundations. And so we committed dollars to make sure that's available in every building. And that'll be part of our tier 2. So we've really tried to make sure that we're following data to go along the way, not gut feelings, not what somebody's preference is, but really what is moving the needle for our kids.
Thank you. Sorry. Any further questions? Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. We are adjourned.
And I will re-adjourn the reorg meeting, which is at the end of the regular meeting for this particular July. But I start it because we have to reorganize the board first with the officers, and then I will pass it on to the newly elected board president. But the first board position for election tonight is board president. I will take a nomination from the board.
I move to nominate Bill Turner as our incoming president.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Wilson's choice of second. And all those in favor of Mr. Turner serving as president?
Aye.
Aye.
Do I need roll call? Okay. We have a 5-0 vote for aye. We will do roll call. Mrs. George Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Fensel.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Aye.
Ms. Fry. Mrs. Horth Krueger.
Aye.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Turner. I'll put you back on my speed dial. We'd like to now elect the vice president. Are there nominations?
I nominate Mrs. Tracy Horth Krueger as vice president.
Second.
It's been nominated and second for Mrs. Horth Krueger to serve as vice president. All those in favor, Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Mrs. Fry, and Mrs. Horth Krueger.
Aye.
Thank you. It's 5-0 vote for Mrs. Horth Krueger to serve as vice president. And the last board officer position is secretary, board secretary. Is there a motion?
I move that Christina Fry be the next board secretary.
Second.
Moved and seconded for Ms. Fry to serve as board secretary. We'll take a roll call vote. Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
Mrs. Horth Krueger.
Aye.
5-0 vote for our board secretary to be served as Ms. Fry. And I will pass the rest of the reorg down to our newly elected president, President Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Woodson. Before I'm going to do now I have the gavel. I'm going to do a point of order for this is to actually want to thank Mrs. George Davis for her service over the past year. Just want to give you a small token from the board. A lot of work goes into this particular role. We appreciate all that you did in the leadership piece of it.
Thank you, guys.
And now I get to read a lot today. So as part of the reorg, we need to talk about a couple of different positions. The first thing we're going to talk about is the appointment of our treasurer and deputy treasurer. I'd like to appoint or get a motion from someone about appointing Mrs. Rebecca Smith who serves as our Washington Township as our Chief Financial Officer, appointing her to be our legal treasurer upon approval.
Mr. President, I move that we appoint Rebecca Smith, Mrs. Rebecca Smith, as our treasurer.
I'll
Been moved
second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. I'd like to call the roll for vote. Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mrs. Fry, Ms. Fry, sorry.
Aye.
All, our motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next, bond for treasurer. Our next item for our reorganization meeting establishes the bond for our treasurer position in the amount of $150,000. The amount follows past practice and is recommended that we approve the establishment of this bond for the treasurer in the amount of $150,000.
Mr. President, I move that we establish a bond in the amount of $150,000 for our treasurer.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I will call the vote. Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. The appointment of deputy treasurer, Mrs. Phyllis Rittenauer, serves as right now. I apologize. Serves Washington Township as a county manager under Mrs. Rebecca Smith's direction, and is recommended that Mrs. Rittenauer be appointed as our legal deputy treasurer with your approval. I take a motion.
I move that we appoint Mrs. Phyllis Rittenauer as our deputy treasurer.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I will call the roll. Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fitzel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Bond for deputy treasurer. Our next item establishes a bond for a deputy treasurer position in the amount of $150,000. The amount follows past practice, and it's recommended that the board approve the establishment of this bond for the deputy treasurer in an amount of $150,000.
Mr. President, I move approval of establishing a bond in the amount of $150,000 for our deputy treasurer.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I will call the vote. Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Now we move on to the permission to pay in advance of board approval. The next item on the agenda is permission to pay in advance or board approval. This permission will allow us to pay listed items on the agenda when the pay falls before or after board meetings. I recommend permission via the board approval to pay in advance cash discount statements, payroll deductions, contract claims, registration and reimbursement for conferences and workshops, and monthly utilities. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we allow permission to pay in advance of board approval, cash discount statements, payroll deductions, contract claims, registrations, and reimbursements for conference/workshops and monthly utilities.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I will call the roll. Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Authority to use facsimile signatures. The next item requests your permission to use facsimile signatures for board-approved claims, board-approved contracts, diplomas for graduating seniors, and a board-approved grants and supplemental services contracts. I ask your approval to use facsimile signatures for the specified 5 areas.
Mr. President, I move approval to grant authority to use facsimile signatures for board-approved claims, diplomas for graduating seniors, board-approved contracts, board-approved grants, and supplemental services contracts.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I will call the vote. Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Mrs. Horth Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Permission for the next item, permission for the superintendent to sign board-approved contracts. The board approval is requested to allow Superintendent Dr. Whitson to sign board-approved contracts as superintendent of schools. These are contracts that have been approved prior at open school board, they have been approved prior at open school board meetings.
Mr. President, I move approval to grant the authorization of the superintendent to approve and sign board approved contracts.
Yeah, no, it doesn't read, yeah, it reads funny. Sorry.
Second.
I was winging it.
The superintendent can sign contracts that we approve, basically. Mrs. Horst Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry.
Aye.
And I as well, motion passes 5-0. And the last section I'd like to talk about is the appointment of legal professional service providers and designation of newspapers and/or qualified publications. First one is appointment of legal professional service providers. The next item on our reorganization agenda is to request your approval for the reappointment of our legal professional service providers. One is Bose McKinney and Evans LLP, School Attorney and District Counsel. Church Hiddle and Antrim, Special Education Attorney, and Ice Miller LLP is our bond counsel. Entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move appointment of the legal professional service providers, Bose McKinney, Church and Atrium, and Ice Miller, as you described.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. I'd like to call the roll. Mrs. Horst Kruger,
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry, and I'm an aye. So motion carries 4-1. Next, the last item under the appointment of legal professional services, designation of newspapers and/or qualified publication to publish notes. Finally, for our reorganization item, I request your approval of the designation for the Indianapolis Star and the Court and Commercial Record to be the official publications to publish our legal notices.
Mr. President, I move approval of the designation of newspapers and/or qualified publications to publish notes as you had described.
Second.
And Mrs. Horst Kruger, I'll call the roll.
Aye.
Mrs. George Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fensel,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. With that, I guess I can ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, can we just signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Got it. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you and have a good evening.